Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. I know this is the last talk of the day, so it means a lot to me to have you guys tuning in. And I just wanted to start by introducing myself. Sorry in advance that my camera is a little bit blurry. I had my laptop fixed a few years ago before we needed to do Zoom calls and things, so I never checked the camera. So unfortunately, it is a bit blurry. So I apologise for that. So I'm Michaela Sharp. I'm the founder of Michaela Sharp Design, which is an upholstery and interior design service. I started just as an upholsterer about 5 years ago, after looking for something more creative to do. So I have very varied work experience. I used to work for startups in London, predominantly Mr. and Mrs. Smith, a boutique hotel agency where I traveled around the world finding boutique hotels for the collection, which was a pretty amazing job. I then also worked for a startup called Urban Massage, now just called Urban, helping them set up all their systems as a brand new tech startup. They'd raised several million in funding, and I was their first employee. So that was a really great job for me to learn really what it was like to work for yourself and be an entrepreneur. So I do have quite a random background in lots of different industries, and that all kind of led to me having the confidence to then being able to start my own business. And that was quite a digression, really. I knew that I had always wanted to work for myself and be an entrepreneur, but I didn't know how that was going to look and in what capacity it would be. And it wasn't actually until a friend suggested to me that I do an upholstery course that I did that and fell in love with it and started my own business. So so that's where I'm at now, and now running a successful upholstery business. And that led me eventually into TV and into interior design and presenting. So again, I have quite a multi-hyphen approach to work, which I think is a very modern approach and works really well for me. It means that I have to be a lot more organized with my time, but I kind of thrive on that. And I think for me, I found that starting my own business in upholstery and pushing to make that successful then gave me the confidence to start to branch out and be more multi-hyphen and explore other avenues in presenting. I actually have a magazine column as well. I think once you start pushing yourself to go out on your own at the beginning, it gives you the confidence to realize that as a creative, especially, you're always full of ideas and there's lots of other things that you can do to generate income, but also just to keep yourself active and busy. And most of these other multi-hyphen ways of working involve working closely with other people and collaborating on ideas or within new industries. So that's what I'm here to talk to you about today, how you can keep quite an open and broad mindset and be open to collaborating with people within your own industry who traditionally we may have seen as competitors, but who I would actually encourage you to speak to learn from, and to work alongside. And obviously then people outside of your industry who run other creative businesses that might intertwine with yours and help to elevate each other towards some common goals. So I'll start today. That was my introduction. And I want to encourage everybody to comment in the chat function, and also there's a Q&A tab there if you want to ask any questions. I'll be keeping an eye. I'll try and answer the questions as we go along, but there will also be some time at the end for questions if you have any. So I want to start today by talking about some of the key advice I was given. Before I started my business 5 years ago, I was unbelievably nervous about leaving a full-time employment to start my own business. And lots of people tend to gradually step away from full-time work, maybe lowering their hours down to part-time, starting things maybe at the weekend. I kind of took quite a dramatic approach and I quit my job and then started up on my own. So that was a really big step for me, and I was unbelievably nervous to do it. And so I was constantly asking people I knew or people that I'd met that worked for themselves what their tips were. And there are a few things that really stand out to me. The first tip was given to me by a really close friend of mine called James, who runs Bellamy Radio in Peckham. And I'd always admired him for starting his own radio station, and he hadn't worked in that before. So like me, he'd quit a full-time job to go and start this radio station. And so I asked him, you know, what is your big tip for me? And he said, just get on with it. And that for me seemed really harsh at the time, because I thought he was going to give me loads of tips and advice and practical things. And he didn't. He just said, just get on with it. And to be honest, that is probably the best advice I've ever been given, because you start with so many ideas when you're thinking about how to start your own creative project or creative business. And your ideas can just run away with you, actually. But you need to start, and you need to start somewhere. And in starting, you will think of lots of other ideas. And also, you'll realize that maybe the initial idea you had of starting your business needs to adapt slightly, and you get feedback from people, and you work in a collaborative way with your clients and with other people within your industry, and you realize that actually your initial idea may need to adapt ever so slightly. So starting it and getting on with it was really great advice from James. The other thing that I was told very early on, and I try to always keep this at the forefront of my mind each working day, is to do one thing a day to promote your business. And I know that for lots of us at the moment, we would assume that an Instagram post a day is enough. But I think when you're working in a creative industry, especially, it's really important to remember that not all your clients are on the same platforms as you. So one of my real top tips for setting up your business and for promoting yourself, promoting your business, is to always look for new avenues to promote yourself. And one day, every day, if you do one thing to promote your business, that might be telling somebody that you just met about your business. That might be a social media post. It might be something more physical that feels more old school, like, you know, giving out a business card to somebody. One thing a day will just gradually layer up, and before you know it, at the end of the year, you know, you've done 365 if you're working every day for yourself, things to promote your business. So those are my top tips for entrepreneurs. Get on with it, which seems harsh, but is, I think, really good advice. And do one thing a day to promote yourself. So let's talk about collaboration in design specifically. And I'm going to obviously talk about this through the lens of my experience as an interior designer, as an upholsterer, and how I find collaborating has worked well with my business and has allowed me to grow and to succeed. And as I said, it has allowed me to enter a more multi-hyphen way of working, where I've opened myself up to doing multiple things, as well as designing, presenting. Some of you may have seen me on TV, just plugging myself there. And also I have a magazine column. I have several businesses that I run, and one of which with a friend. So this kind of collaborative way of working has served me well, and I'd like to think that I can share some really top tips with you today. And I hope that if you're not in a creative industry, that these will still apply to you. The most important thing, I think, before I started my business was I realized that actually I always have quite a collaborative approach to work anyway. So when I was working for other people, I still always was so intrigued by other departments. So I used to work in sales, I used to work in partnerships, and every department, right, needs some interaction with the others, whether it's with marketing or with finance, and there's always something to learn there. And collaboration really at its heart is being inquisitive and being open to working with other people. So the more you can understand about the industry that you're in, hi Natasha, thanks for saying that you saw me on TV. The more you can understand the business that you're in, the more kind of insights you can have and the more you can grow. And being inquisitive is such a key part of being a successful creative business. So even if you haven't started your own business yet, don't be afraid to ask the other departments that you work with lots of questions. I learned so much from working with the founders of the companies that I worked for before, or working alongside the finance departments or alongside the marketing departments. And of course, when you start your own business, you'll need all of these skills. You'll need to do your own marketing, your own finance, be your own CEO, and be able to kind of do every single aspect of running a business until you can hire people. So whilst you're working for other people, draw on all of that experience. You've got specialists in every individual field there. So make sure that you're making the most out of asking them questions and learning from them. And once you have this kind of inquisitive, collaborative approach, I think it will serve you really, really well when you start your own business. So then applying that to my own business, once I started, I hired somebody straight away. I actually launched with an employee straight away. His name was Steve, and he'd been an upholsterer for decades. And having a collaborative way of working with him meant that I was always asking him questions, and I accepted that he would be better at certain things than me. And that's fine, because when you're hiring, that's what you want. You want to hire people that are experts in their field and that will bring something to your business. And you kind of have to accept that they will be better than you in certain areas, and that's what you pay them for. That's what you want. So having that kind of approach to push them, to ask them questions, and to be open to their feedback and open to their ideas, and so that you're working together with them rather than just always trying to implement your own idea of how you want things to go. Obviously, when you're the founder of a brand, you have certain measures in place for your quality and your brand guidelines, but really there's so much scope within that to allow your team to work with you collaboratively and bring you ideas and challenge you a little bit. So the most important thing, I think, is to work like that with your team. Those are the people that are going to push your business forward, and those are the people that are going to really give you a lot of insights as well. The next part really is about working quite closely with your suppliers. So despite being a creative, it's easy sometimes to think that you create everything on your own. But as an upholsterer, yeah, of course, the labor is done by me, but I don't make the fabrics, I don't make the raw materials. And these things play a huge part in the quality of the work that I can produce. So not being afraid to really talk in depth with your suppliers about what they offer, any challenges that you may have, what they would advise for certain things, because again, they are the specialists in their field. So I talk a lot with my fabric representatives from different fabric houses that I work with about the new collections, about the designs and why the collections are designed the way that they are in certain colorways, and the properties of certain fabrics, so that I can relay all of this to my clients knowledgeably, and so that I can design things with relevance. And so embracing the fact that I don't always have all of the answers, but that I work with key suppliers for a reason, and I'm happy to pick up the phone to them and talk to them and ask them the questions, so that I'm always learning and so that I can speak knowledgeably to clients when they then do ask me. So that was another thing that I think I kind of learned as I went along, because at first I felt like I had to know everything, and fabric reps would come and see me and talk to me about things, and I would kind of pretend, oh yeah, I already knew that, but of course I didn't, and I was learning. And now I kind of realize the value in embracing not always having the answers, and being open to learning things and asking the right questions, so that you can keep challenging yourself and keep learning and keep growing. You never want to feel like you're standing still. I think as an entrepreneur, it would be sad for me to think that I had all of the answers, because that means there's really nothing left to do. So embracing the fact that you don't know everything, but there are people out there that can answer your questions and help you, is a much more kind of positive way of working, I think. Now, this next one might seem a little bit strange, but even embracing your rivals. And this came about for me because I had seen a lot of really fantastic upholsterers online when I started out. There are an infinite amount of brilliant interior designers now that I'm in that industry as well. And it's really easy to assume that everybody is your competitor, and therefore you shouldn't speak to them and kind of keep them at arm's length. But for me, I got a really huge opportunity to do a massive commercial project for my upholstery business, and somebody wanted me to do 3 restaurants for them in a really quick turnaround with hundreds of chairs and loads of built-in bench seats. And I just couldn't cope with the capacity, but I didn't want to turn the job down. So I started to reach out to other local upholsterers to see if they would take the job on with me. You know, I wouldn't define their terms, but they would have a contract with me and then kind of subcontracting out part of the work to them. And I was so surprised that so many upholsterers just did not want to work with me because they felt we were in competition. But I knew they couldn't win the job on their own because they were the same kind of size as me, and they didn't want me to win the job either. And then eventually I found an upholsterer who was open to collaborating and said, yes, I will work with you on that job. These are my terms. This is how much I would like to be paid for it, which I agreed to. We agreed the timeline and the quality, and he took on half the job for me. And so I was able to take one of the biggest commissions I've ever had for upholstery, but I wouldn't have been able to do that without collaborating. And it did seem really alien at first to reach out to another upholsterers and ask them to work alongside me. But ultimately, it was the best possible solution because I got the biggest job. I had, you know, I managed to get paid for my 50%. He got paid for his 50%. And then afterwards, we had a really lovely relationship where he would call me up and ask me for advice on things, and I would call him up, and we still speak. And I still do that, although I've been very busy with other projects recently. But it meant it kind of changed my view of how to work within my own industry. And it made me realize that there's actually a lot of scope to work alongside people within your industry, and you don't have to be rivals and you don't have to be competitors. And especially if you feel confident in the service that you're offering yourself and the products that you offer yourself. I know that I'm quite different from other upholsterers out there in my approach and the quality of my work and how I talk to my clients. So I don't really feel too threatened by other people. I'm happy for them all to be doing well. So that was a really big lesson for me to learn, and it has really shaped the way that I now work in the interior design space. And with other things like TV and presenting can feel really competitive sometimes, but actually if you just kind of embrace the people that you're meant to be up against and think, okay, well, I could learn something from all of these people, equally they could learn something from me, and fundamentally we will all find our own niche and we'll find our own lane. And so really we're not in competition, because somebody that wants to work with me probably wouldn't want to work with them, and vice versa. So just being open to learning from people is a really lovely way to work. And I think it allows you to learn more and progress more and feel also part of an industry, rather than you're on the outside looking in at what everyone else is doing. You feel that, okay, like we're all in this together, we're all learning together, we can have difficult conversations and we'll all succeed together. So that's always a nice feeling. So that's collaborating with your rivals, collaborating with your suppliers, collaborating with your team. Then I think one of the most fun ways of collaborating is probably the one that most people talk about, especially on social media, doing a collab with kind of a complementary business. So they're not in the same industry as you, and especially in design, there is so much crossover and so many opportunities to collaborate with people. But this is perhaps one of the more complicated ways of collaborating, because when you're two different businesses bringing in two different skill sets, it can be hard to find that sweet spot and that middle ground and make sure that everybody's getting enough out of it. And this is probably the type of collaboration that needs the most thought. I think it's probably the way that people instantly think about collaborating. But for me, it's one of the most complicated, because I sometimes have to decline things, and that is a hard lesson to learn, to say no to things, but you can't say yes to everything. And if it's not going to serve your business, and if it's not going to serve your growth and your exposure, then sometimes collaborating in that way doesn't really add much, and it doesn't really prove to be very beneficial. So collaborating with other companies, I think, should be done carefully, and I make my decisions by weighing up the time that I need to put into something, what I think I'm going to get out of it. And obviously it's easy to think, oh, I'll get loads more followers or whatever, but will those followers will they be engaged, and will they eventually buy from you? Will they understand your offering compared to this other company that they've found you via? And over the years, I've learned actually some of the collaborations that I thought I would do that would prove the most fruitful, I didn't really get much out of it afterwards. And I had maybe offered to work for less than I would do normally in order to secure something that I got so excited about, collaborating with this brand or that brand. And actually afterwards I felt that maybe I hadn't taken away from it what I was hoping, and I hadn't had the followers and I hadn't had the amount of new business come through, but it had taken up a huge amount of my time. And so now I'm a lot more cautious with brands, especially bigger brands, and when they approach me, that I've realized there has to be something in it for me, and I have to feel that the work I'm putting in is going to be mirrored with what they're putting in as well, but hopefully with what the expected outcome is going to be. And so for me, I love working with independent brands and with other small businesses. And so that's what I try to focus on, because I feel then I can really learn something from the way that they work and learn something from their processes. And I'm quite open about talking about my processes and how I work, so that I feel like we could both get something out of it, as well as creating something together. So a brilliant example of that is working with one of the girls from the show, Charlotte, if you watched Interior Design Masters. And we launched a studio called Studio Genetti, making bespoke pieces of homeware, furniture and soft furnishings. And Charlotte is a textile designer and I'm an upholsterer. So it was a very obvious collaboration, but it's a great example of, I've never designed fabric, but I could sit with Charlotte and talk about, you know, the designs that we wanted to make and learn from how she was able to do that. And then she would bring me the fabric and we would talk about the shapes that we wanted and what we wanted to make. And then she would watch me sew loads of cushions and make some furniture, and she would learn something from me. So that collaboration has had a huge impact actually on the way that I work now, and it's doing really well. Studio Genetti is up and running and a business in its own right now. But I think it's a perfect example of cherry picking the kinds of collaborations that you want to do and not being too eager to just say yes to everything. That is a lesson that I think comes later when you're an entrepreneur. I'm sure lots of people who are listening and who work for themselves will agree. Saying no is one of the hardest things, but it does really serve you well if you feel confident in your choices. Saying no to stuff is a hard lesson, but a very good one to learn. I can see some questions coming through. I'm just going to open these up. How do you get suppliers for your business? How do you find collaborators? How do you find your edge in your industry? These are such good questions. So finding suppliers is an interesting one, because often, of course, people don't want to share information. Your rivals might not want to share information about the suppliers that they use. But again, sometimes just asking them is all they can say is, I don't want to tell you, and that's fine. But trial and error is obviously the way. Gradually, as you get bigger, companies will approach you to supply you with things. But at the beginning, it's just about, when you're setting up a business, doing the groundwork and figuring out your pricing and where to source stuff and the quality of the materials that you're going to use, and buying it maybe in smaller quantities to begin with, so that you know that you trust the quality. And finding your edge in an industry, I love that question. I think you have to embrace your own story, and that's the most important lesson to learn from collaborating and finding your edge, because we're all different and everybody has a different approach to work. And when you're creative, it's very easy to, you want to compare yourself to everybody else, and they're doing this and they've collaborated with that person. But actually taking the time to step back and think of your own ideas and trust in your own instincts, and believe in your own story. You know, there aren't many Black interior designers. There are even less Black upholsterers. So when I started, I didn't want to put my face in my branding, because I thought a lot of my clients are going to be, to book upholstery for some reason seems to be booked by quite affluent white people. And I thought, okay, Maybe they don't want to see me on the branding, and maybe they won't trust me with their furniture. Maybe they won't want to book me to do the upholstery for their restaurant or design their home. So at first I didn't put myself in my branding, and that was a really silly mistake, actually. It took maybe a year and a half for me to be told by other businesses, by other independent creative businesses, that I should do that. And that came as quite a shock to me. But people said, you know, we've followed you on Instagram for ages. Now I've met you at this networking event, and I wonder why you don't put more pictures of yourself online, or why you don't talk about yourself on your website. Or why, when I started, my business wasn't even my name. It wasn't Michaela Sharp Design, it was Sharp and Simpson Upholstery. And people asked me, why don't you center yourself more in your business? And the reason was because I was nervous that being Black was going to be a disadvantage. But what I actually found was that putting myself at the center of my brand has done me the world of good. And so many more opportunities came about since I did that, because people wanted to work with me specifically, and they understood my story and they understood my niche. And, you know, I was able to explain that I was raised by a carpenter, and my nan taught me to sew, and the perfect fusion of carpentry and sewing is upholstery. And so it's been something I've been inadvertently kind of thinking about and practicing for most of my life, doing woodwork and doing a lot of work with fabric. And people were really interested to hear that story. And then I realized I was kind of foolish for leaving that out of my brand at the beginning. Now it's very much at the center of what I do, but finding your edge, you know, you already have your edge, you are your own edge. And I think once you embrace that your uniqueness is also part of your selling point, then that can be really, really powerful. How do you manage so many things at the same time? With great difficulty, to be honest. I find that a multi-hyphen approach to work can be quite overwhelming. You know, you start every week, and I might have to write and submit my magazine column. I might have a brand partnership to do on social media. I might have some TV filming to do, as well as replying to all of my clients about upholstery projects that they've got booked in or they've got coming up, sending out fabric samples to them, and with interior design projects on the go as well, which obviously are much longer projects and take more time, maybe a matter of months. But those clients obviously have the most amount of questions and the most amount of decisions to make. So it can be really difficult juggling all of those things. And I've had to just get more and more disciplined with my time. And that's always evolving, to be perfectly honest with you. At the moment, I'm finding it really helpful to block out my calendar with specific tasks, so that I know, you know, tomorrow morning for 2 hours, I have to work on that project. 2 hours after that, I'm going to do the content for this campaign. You know, after that, I might have a call about something else, and I have to put it all in my diary. Otherwise, I think I can just get to, I'm sure we all have this, right? You kind of procrastinate a little bit and you think, I'll come back to that. Maybe I'll do that tomorrow. And then before you know it, everything's kind of at deadline and bunched up. So yeah, I have to be super, super disciplined about my work schedule and my timings. And that has really helped me. But it's something I'm always working on. And I have to always be working on it because I'm always taking on more and more. So yeah, it's kind of a growing, evolving thing, how I manage my time and all my different projects. I was going to say actually loads more about collaborative working, and I've just realised we're nearly out of time. But if anyone has any other questions now, oh yeah, sorry, I didn't realise it was in reverse. What advice would you give to a more digital service-based business? I mean, most things are digitally based, I guess, now, but I think everything that I've said can be applied to any industry. So being open-minded, keeping an eye on what is going on in your industry, what other people are doing, but also finding the time to step back and think of your own ideas and your own goals and what you want to do. And then just being open-minded in the way that you work, putting yourself forward, championing yourself for new projects, promoting yourself at least once a day. That can be, you know, you can apply those things in any industry. So that's what I would advise, really. Okay, great. It's 1:15. I think maybe somebody is going to come back in and tell me to finish, but I'm so sorry. I actually had so many more points to say, but it's been really lovely chatting to you all, and thank you so much for your lovely questions. Let me just check back in the other chat. Yeah, thank you. I think that's all we had time for. I don't know if someone's going to come back in and count me out, but thank you all so much for tuning in. It's been really lovely to chat to you. And if you do want to find me online, I would love to answer. If you have any other questions, I would love to answer them for you. So you can find me on Instagram, or you can send me an email via my website. I'm always really happy to champion new people into the design industry in particular. But if you have any questions about starting your own business or whatever, please do get in touch. As I said, I'm still learning and I'm still always adapting. I only started doing interior design last year. And so 5 years into working for myself, I feel that I'm very much still at the start of my journey. And people still give me lots of good nuggets of advice. And I think that being open-minded and taking advice from people is a good way. It serves me really well, actually, appreciating that I don't have all the answers. I am still learning, and that I want to always continue learning, and I'll be doing that well into, you know, my later career, that I'm open to constantly evolving and learning from the people around me. So watch this space, and I'm really excited to see what you all do. And thank you for tuning in. I know this is the last talk of the day, so it means a lot to have you here. Thank you.